Swine.
It's time for a new era of communication in the swine industry, one that you can get the latest updates while commuting or driving to farms. Here you will have the brightest minds of the global swine industry in your pocket.
Your learning has not stopped when you left college, does not stop when you finish your training program, does not stop when you finish whatever it is you've done. Even at 30, 40, 50, 60, you have to continue to improve your skills and prepare for a future which is going to be extremely competitive.
Swine It Podcast is only possible with the support of forward-looking and innovative sponsors like Elanco's Prevacent, a new PRRS Spective. Visit Prevacent, PRRS.US to learn more. NutriQuest, experts serving producers and delivering breakthrough solutions. Genesis, the first power in genetics. Zinpro, essential trace minerals, exceptional performance. Every Pig, a simple yet powerful pig health and production management tool. Gestal, always one step ahead in swine feeding.
Welcome to Swine It Podcast. My name is 𝘺𝘰𝘳 𝐂𝐨𝑚𝑎, your host for today's episode.
This episode's sponsor highlight is about NutriQuest. NutriQuest delivers targeted breakthrough solutions to animal producers via nutritional and non-nutritional products, services, and technologies. At NutriQuest, we believe in ingenuity inspired by servitude, and that our success comes from helping producers realize improved profitability through optimized technologies and efficient operation.
Hello everyone. Today we have Aidan Connolly, and we're going to chat about innovation in livestock production, what is here and what is coming to reach us here in the very near future. Very exciting times ahead of us. So how are you today, Aidan?
Great, thank you very much. Yes, I've been very busy over the last 3-4 weeks, and of course the world of agriculture is a very exciting place to be at the moment.
It is, and if you can just share what you told me a few minutes ago on the flight that you had canceled and the audience that was waiting for you there.
Yeah, it's funny, Marcio, you say that, and I discovered obviously we have a lot of things in common with your Brazilian background and the fact you're going to China soon. I was invited to a conference in China that I couldn't make, and they agreed this morning I should come in by video conference. And what I didn't realize was the flight coming out of JFK was going to be delayed nearly 3 hours. So I didn't make the conference, and I got the word that, which I knew there was about almost 1,000 people in the audience, but there were actually another 240,000 people online who want to learn about digital technologies for pigs specifically and for agriculture in general.
It is amazing. Wow. I wouldn't think there would be an audience that big, but just think about China and technology. It's amazing. Wow.
Maybe you need to consider translating your podcast into Chinese.
It's actually, we had discussions about it this week, so you're onto something there. Very cool. Aidan, if you could just walk us through your career for those that don't know you, from the beginning all the way to currently, that would be great.
Yeah, so I was very lucky when I finished my MBA in Ireland. I joined a company called Alltech. When I joined them, the turnover of the company was 24 million. And actually, during the period of those 28 years, it grew to 2.3 billion.
Wow.
So I was responsible within the company for setting up their office in France. Then I went to Brazil and lived in France for 2 years, lived in Brazil for 4.5 years, setting up not just the Brazilian office, but also a factory and offices throughout Latin America. I went to North America with him and ran some of the North American business, then came back to the European operation where Europe was described very broadly. So I went all the way to Russia, Kazakhstan, Armenia, down into North Africa, but it was covering about 50 countries. Then went to Washington, D.C., where I joined the boards of many of the main associations there, which was kind of cool. Turkey Federation, National Pork Producers. I worked with Chicken Council, Animal Feed, and some global bodies like the IFIF. Started visiting China quite regularly, and then moved to headquarters in Kentucky, which was I was given the responsibility of Chief Innovation Officer. So I was working directly with the research group. And then last Thanksgiving, I left to start my own company called 𝐴𝐵𝑟𝑒𝑡ech Capital out of North Carolina, and subsequently also became the CEO of a startup called 𝐀𝐢𝐝, which is involved with recognition of animals using cameras. Mm-hmm. So, pretty quiet, pretty quiet career. In fact, sometimes I say to people, the Alltech one in particular, it really felt like when we went from 24 to 2.5 billion, it was a bit like starting with a startup and then moving to a unicorn.
Wow. Yes, that's a big change there. That's amazing. Very cool. What do you think, Aidan, there are things that seem futuristic, as you transition here from your career to this topic of innovation in livestock production? What are things that seem futuristic but are already starting to happen in livestock production, and also any comments in pigs specifically as well?
Yeah, so clearly we have, I'd say, 3 big buckets of technology. One is, for me, digital technologies. I've written a lot about these. CRISPR, gene editing technologies. Clearly, CRISPR is the next level of gene editing beyond what we've done with GMOs. There will be more generations of that technology coming through. And the third bucket for me would be nutritional genomics and nutrigenomics, how nutrition changes gene expression. In the first bucket, it does seem futuristic to think of, I've called it the 8 digital technologies. 4 of those are hardware based. So those would be things like 3D printing, robots, sensors. If we think of, and obviously machine vision, camera vision, allied to artificial intelligence and machine learning. If we think therefore of the 4 software-based technologies that are changing things, we are thinking about virtual reality, augmented reality. I've mentioned already artificial intelligence, and the 4th one would be blockchain. If you want to put a 9th technology in there, probably the Internet of Things, which connects all of this together, the hardware devices, the software, the algorithms connected together. So within those 8 or 9 digital technologies, what are we seeing in pigs? Clearly, sensors are something that everybody's very excited by. Mm-hmm. And we've seen companies like SwineTech using sensors to improve the productivity of sows, preventing pigs from getting crushed. We see sensors being used to detect changes in ammonia levels in barns, carbon dioxide levels in barns, temperature in barns. So in other words, environmental management systems are really exciting. If I look at something like 3D printing, not too much so far, specifically in the swine world, though obviously we're already seeing very affordable 3D printers which are capable of printing things like pizzas and cakes and candies. Mm-hmm. So where you've got highly processed foods, 3D printer certainly can do it, but they're already using 3D printing in Israel to print meat. So, some interesting things around that. Clearly, if we think about blockchain, I often at conferences, when I engage people, I ask them to explain blockchain to me, and nobody really wants to. From an audience, you don't want to put your hand up and explain what blockchain is. But it's the idea that we have a traceable ledger online that can't be changed, can't be altered, and has the potential really to prevent us or to give us more traceability when you have food safety scares, when you have recalls in mind. If I look at what, in particular, probably the types of technologies being used today, virtual reality is being used at consumer level to teach them about what happens on farms. McDonald's in the UK would be a prime example of that. Augmented reality is being used in the case of teaching people what to see when they look at a field, so probably more crop-based. The some of that is also being used to teach veterinarians how to recognize warning signs of health issues. So maybe I should just pause there, because I could, as you could tell, I could keep on going. But within all of those digital technologies, they're all having some impact already on pigs. You do see, in particular in China, people using artificial intelligence systems to analyze the sounds of pigs. You see them using artificial intelligence to try to estimate heart rate of sows. They're looking at indicators of other health parameters. Within 𝐀𝐢𝐝, we've started to work looking at estimating weights of pigs in growing finishing barns. So probably, if I looked at where we are today, blockchain is what people are talking about. I don't think it's quite there, even though Walmart is working on it. Sensors clearly being used today, yes. Virtual and augmented reality for training and for information, absolutely. What's coming within digital technologies, I think artificial intelligence is the one I would believe is going to be the most transformational in the next couple of years.
Very cool. Yeah, that's very exciting. I love that. So from all those, if you could distill down a little bit, okay, what would be the one or two that people are implementing right now? I think you already said on the sensors, but also what would be the one or two that should be coming very strongly? And that might be the artificial intelligence. I don't know, what are your thoughts there?
Artificial intelligence is the one I think I'm the biggest believer in. And I don't think I'm allying, that's being allied at the moment primarily to sensors. So I think the cameras are the most interesting because they're non-invasive. They can collect information easily. And if it delivers an answer which does not look correct, at least the farmer has the ability, the producer has the ability to look at images. So that's combined with using that data, that information, using artificial intelligence to interpret it is very exciting. CRISPR gene editing is already here. With what's going on with African swine fever, the development of a vaccine has been very slow, and it's very complicated because, of course, the size of the molecule that we're going to require. And I know there are at least 8 companies in China who seem to be in development of something, but at the same time, we've seen 50% of the Chinese pigs wiped out, which is a quarter of the world's pigs.
Wow.
And that's having huge knock-on effects to everything we do. I go to China a lot, and sometimes I hear about maybe 70% of the pigs, 80% of the pigs are wiped out. I honestly think that's an exaggeration. I think we're exaggerating too much, overcompensating. But I think it's certainly 55% at the moment. Nutrigenomics, the impact of nutrition on genetic expression, gene expression, not genetic expression, gene expression, that has the potential to do lots of things in disease, meat quality. Has lots to do with fertility. When we look at things like those mannose-rich fractions, how are those impacting on the animal we're feeding? And in the case of sows, even the animals may be coming from those sows. So those artificial intelligence, gene editing through CRISPR, nutrigenomics, those are absolutely happening today. And already the largest producers in the world are gaining the benefit of that.
That's pretty exciting. And from the European standpoint, do you see any repercussion on how they respond to the gene editing side of things?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate to hear that the Europeans are going to, some Europeans, let's say, are trying to regulate CRISPR in the same way as we have seen the regulation of GMOs. And I don't think that's going to be very helpful, because remembering that yogurts have been consumed in Europe for now over 12 or 14 years using gene-edited, CRISPR-edited bacteria to produce that yogurt. So it's not very consistent. And I think in particular, gene editing is a critical part of how we get more food out of the planet more sustainably, less waste. Everything gets better with CRISPR. And CRISPR is a natural process that exists inside of our animals and our plants already. We already have the enzyme that cuts and repairs DNA. So all we're doing is we're activating that cutting, that scissors technique. We're not putting in any transgenic DNA. So this, unlike GMOs, we're not introducing something that wasn't there in the first place. And I know that Europe has the potential, we've seen it in the past, to mess things up quite badly by over-regulating things. But I would hope in this situation, common sense will prevail, and we will see an acceptance of CRISPR to a degree that we've never seen of GMOs.
Interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting area. And where do you see agriculture, Aidan, going, say, 30 years from now?
Yeah, to be honest, Marcio, I never answer that question. I've been at conferences where they say, where do you see, 2050, 2060? I have no idea. I think a lot about these issues. I think a lot about where this world is going. And I'm really struggling because there's so much happening so quickly. We're talking about, will we see augmented human beings, as in that we will be implanting the equivalent of iPhones inside of our head, right, or extra chips in our brains. There are people who realistically imagine that to happen by 2032, 2033. Singularity U in California, in San Francisco area, has been talking about this for a long time. Now, that's a very game-changing phenomenon. Right. I'm a big believer that we will continue to eat milk, drink milk, eat meat, eat eggs. But then you contrast it with the billions of dollars that are going into trying to create these fake meats, to create these alternative proteins. And you've got to imagine somebody's going to do something. I don't see it capturing all of the market. I frankly don't think it's ever going to exceed 15, 20%. But the margins on that are better than they are for farming. So one of the existential threats we face in terms of farming is the potential that people are not going to consume products that come from animals. Or maybe they do at a very low level, but we'll increasingly see the products coming directly from texturized proteins, or from even proteins grown on a petri dish. I don't like that future, but we have to be realistic and say it's possible. Whenever I get to a conference and I say, where are we going to be 30 years from now? And I ask the audience rather than trying to answer it myself, somebody always says, well, when are we going to grow food on Mars? And even with the craziness of what that is, I think within a 30-year period, it's too soon. But we have to imagine there could be different ways, different places, locations where we might end up producing food as we go forward. Wow.
It's funny that you touched on three aspects that I'm very fond of, which is, one is the whole sensors and cameras with AI, which that's what Tesla is doing right now, a killer job, right? And then the other one is Neuralink from Elon Musk there, with lots of MIT scientists doing very, very cool things. And then finally on Mars, SpaceX just launched a Starship. They had a launch a few weeks ago, and that was amazing. So I think it's so exciting because things are moving so fast. It's unbelievable.
Very fast. And yet at the same time, your listeners are probably wondering, because these businesses are not making money. And if you're a farmer and you don't make money, you go out of business. You might make it through 1 year or 2 years, but eventually you go out of business. You have businesses being created on the basis that we're getting more customers, we're collecting more data, we've got more information, we've got more value. And a lot of that just does not, frankly, make sense in the old-fashioned world where you have to make something, sell something, and make a profit on it. So I wonder, and I know a lot of farmers look at this and say, this just doesn't make any sense. How is it possible? Where did this come from? Where are we going with this technology? Frankly, I am very excited, as you know, and I write a lot on LinkedIn. I started publishing for Forbes very recently, trying to write articles that would hopefully be of interest, not just to farmers, people involved in agriculture, food, but also to the general public. But I think in this area here, there was quite a big disconnect between technology companies and the farmers that they're trying to provide solutions to.
Wow, very nice. Yeah, that makes total sense. Very good, Aidan. Anything else before we move to the 3 questions we ask every guest?
No.
Isn't it time your PRRS protocol evolved? Elanco's Prevacent PRRS is safe and effective, offering at least 26 weeks of immunity duration against the respiratory form of PRRS. As the first and only on-market USDA-licensed vaccine containing a contemporary lineage 1 field strain, Prevacent is a contemporary solution. Connect with your veterinarian or an Elanco representative to understand how Prevacent can fit your operation. Visit prevacentprrs.us to learn more. Prevacent, it's time for a new perspective.
It is time to our famous three.
So the three questions we ask every guest every episode, Aidan. The first one is, what's your favorite swine-related book, if any?
Swine-related book?
Or resource?
I have to say I always liked the nutrition books, particularly those that covered nutrition management. Mm-hmm. And in particular, I really liked the writings of 𝐥𝐻 Cole. Mm-hmm. He's from the University of Nottingham. Mm-hmm. I actually met 𝐸𝑩 and spoke, translated for 𝐸𝑩 when I lived in Brazil. So I was his translator. I even translated one time from English to French. So I had to, if you're the translator, you have to know the speech better than the professor. you need to really know it pretty well. So I enjoyed him as a person. I loved his way of thinking about farming and feeding pigs. Very practical. John Gadd wrote for quite a number of magazines in the past. He's quite elderly now, but he is a great writer for translating scientific publications, ideas that you'd hear, theoretical ideas, into something that farmers, producers, workers could use. Very practical advice. 8 things you should know if you're managing sows. 3 things to look for in your weaning pigs. Mm-hmm. So that's the type of person, and he's written a couple of books as well. So those are 2 writers I really enjoy from a swine perspective.
Very nice. And what would be your favorite book in general?
Well, I generally read books that try to take my mind off my business. But the one books that really made me think recently were the books of Yuval Noah, Yuvalnoah. He's written one called Homo Sapiens. Mm-hmm. He also wrote one called Homo Deus. More recently, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. Mm-hmm. He writes about artificial intelligence in a way which is very eye-opening and very scary. Mm-hmm. In particular, has a lot of projections and predictions about the future. But I do think we need to understand where it's all going. And he's a very easy to read. He describes the history of where farming came from and the world came from. He's not particularly pro-farming, but I think we also need to understand what the other side is saying. And for people who don't take the time to read books, I would recommend you to look up any of, particularly Yuval Noah. Look him up online on YouTube. You'll find videos where he's being interviewed, and even the questions and answer sessions can be really, really interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah, I've heard about that one. Never read that one. Very, very cool. And then finally, Aidan, in your opinion, what separates successful swine professionals from those that are not?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Marcio. I would say, so in general with people in agriculture today, the first thing I say to them is get a passport to travel. And they will always say, but why do I need to? I'm in the United States. We're the leaders in swine production. Well, if you get the chance to go to Chile and see the old Super Polio company, and to see what they're doing with pigs, and to see mortality levels of probably below 0.5%, you're just going to learn an awful lot about biosecurity. You're going to learn a lot about the world. If you get the chance to see what they're doing in China, with the old farms and even with the new farms, if you get this chance to go to Siberia and see what's being done in terms of pig production in Russia, and why Russia has become, in my view, the most astonishing story of the last 15 years in terms of improving productivity, and again, showing how things can or should be done, even in the countries which traditionally were not that good. Brazil is always amazingly impressive. You don't get to just open your eyes to what's happening in pigs, but what's happening in crops, what's happening in chickens, what's happening, what Brazil is doing. And even though a lot of bad news about Brazil's economy, agriculture continues to march forward and has continued to become bigger and bigger juggernaut in terms of its global presence. So my first comment would be a successful swine professional should definitely get themselves a passport, take opportunities to travel whenever they can. When you're in the country, go to the grocery stores, go to the supermarkets, go see how food is being sold, go to open markets, go to organic markets if necessary. Just take the opportunity to see that. Clearly, that's all part of a general process. And in fact, maybe I should take the last question. Yuval Noah was asked, if you have children and the children have to study, what should they study? Should they study animal science? Should they become veterinarians? Should they become lawyers? Should they become accountants? Or should they study mathematics? Or should they study art? Or should they study music? And he took a long time to answer the question. And after a long time, he said, I don't really know the answer to your question. I don't think any particular choice in university or career is better than any other one. But what's absolutely clear to me, and you should tell your children, is that when they finish university, they cannot assume that they finished learning, because the future of the world is continuous learning. Right. And if I was to give one piece of advice to swine professional of any sort, it is assume your learning has not stopped when you left college, does not stop when you finish your training program, does not stop when you finish whatever it is you've done. Even at 30, 40, 50, 60, you have to continue to improve your skills and prepare for a future which is going to be extremely competitive.
Wow, yeah. That is amazing, Aidan. I love that. Yeah, we have to be always learning and traveling to see what's going on. And funny enough, that's one of the goals of the podcast, which is bring that perspective that you just brought in, which is what is happening in other places, right? And how can we copy and paste some of those things? It's much easier to evolve through a copy and paste than radical innovation, even though we need both.
Absolutely.
Very cool. So thanks a lot. I know you're a busy man, and really, really appreciate your time and your insights here today, Aidan.
Yeah, thanks. And as you appreciate, I know you've done it already, but for anybody listening, I'm always very open to being connected on LinkedIn. I try to publish most of what I write there, so it's open access and it's free. Clearly, if anybody wants to connect with me through 𝐀𝐢𝐝, that's also possible. So I do also tweet, so you can see pictures of where I'm going in the world and what I'm seeing, and I try to only focus on issues relating to food and to agriculture. But again, delighted to connect with anybody after the podcast that would like to know more.
Very, very, very cool. Yeah, love that. With that, thanks a lot, Aidan.
Thank you, Marcio.
Hey guys and girls, thank you so much for being part of our community, as well as thanks for all the great guests that we have had. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I do. To be part of our email list and get some exclusive materials, go to our website, www.swineit.com. That's swineit.com, and subscribe to our email list. Also, we love feedback. So if you use the Apple Podcasts app, please leave us a review. It is much appreciated. We'll talk soon.